Motion
I have
to
a motion
approve
to
the
approve
minutes?
the meeting minutes. Pardon me?
A motion to approve the meeting minutes?
We have a motion from Ms. Gallivan. Do I have a second?
Second,
I have a second from Ms. Lawson. Let me poll the committee. Mr. Frisha,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Abstain.
Ms. Lawson,
yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson. Get back to you, Mr. Conroy,
Yeah.
Jeffrey Fisher,
Yes.
Jack Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Connor. Get back to you, Mr. Hahn,
Yes.
Mr. Senek,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor.
Yes.
Very good. And back to Mr. Anderson, your vote?
Yes. Yes.
All right, it is a vote. Our next order of business is to take a look at the schematic design submission. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Jarvis, I believe.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. Welcome, everyone. So tonight, as we've talked about for a while, big meeting, a lot on the agenda tonight. A couple things to get through. We have the early design package, or the early package for submission to the MSBA for schematic design. We had talked through the table of contents at the last meeting, so we have an update on that. You also had a link to those items in your packet that went out last week. So you had a chance to take a look at some of those if you were interested in those to get a little more detail. We also have a Department of Education and Secondary Education submittal to review and vote on submission of that. That will go into the MSBA as part of that package, and then they will review that and forward that on to DESE. We also have the cost estimates back. Copies of those estimates were in your packet, along with a comparison matrix back to the preferred schematic report estimate that we received back in February when we were looking at the preferred schematic, kind of a high level estimate. So we'll take a look at that and talk through some of the key points of that estimate that we just received, how that plays into a total project budget. So part of SD is we will be submitting that total project budget worksheet that we talked through at last meeting. You also had an updated draft in your packet. We have a slightly updated draft tonight. The numbers haven't changed all that much, basically the same, just a few tweaks here and there. So we'll talk through that. And then TAP A is here with their team of engineers that can to provide an update on sustainability and energy efficiency. We had talked through that a few weeks ago. They came back now having done an energy model for this building and some of the different options that could be available moving forward as far as energy efficiency or sustainability is concerned. If we get through all that information, mostly with the cost estimate and the budget, and we can take a temperature of the committee, feel if we're done enough to vote and submit the full SD package. Right now, we have another meeting teed up for July 1st. If we feel comfortable tonight, we could possibly vote and move the package forward tonight and discuss whether or not we need to meet on the 1st, but we do have that on the calendar. So without any more updates there, we will get started. We'll also go through those last few dates between now and the end of the month before we get out of here. So we already did the minutes. An update on the early submittal package. So this is the table of contents that we talked through at the last meeting. And basically the MSBA had reached out to all of its projects, given the amount of projects it has coming through, the fact that it doesn't have a board meeting this September, and a lot of projects hitting their August board meeting. They reached out to see if projects would be able to submit some of the information early. We had identified the items highlighted in yellow. I updated a few by hand at the last minute here that TAP A has been working on this week and actually got done. So the items in yellow are what were in the link that you saw over the weekend prior to this meeting. A lot of this is resubmitting or reconfirming some of the information that had already been submitted in the preferred schematic report. Some of the information is obviously new for schematic design, such as the estimates. And the goal is to submit the items highlighted in yellow tomorrow, the 23rd, which will be 2 weeks before the final submittal is due on the 7th of July. And then on the 7th of July, TAP A will actually resubmit the entire package, including what's going in early. So there's a full package for the MSBA to be in line for their August 25th board meeting. Any questions with what was received over the weekend regarding any of the items that were highlighted? And we'll get into more detail regarding the estimates and the budget in a minute, but any questions regarding some of the other things A lot of it's administrative ed program we've already seen. The narratives and things I think we've already talked through to some extent, but if you have any questions, let us know. Everyone okay with that or any concerns? All right.
I don't see any questions, Brian.
Okay. Chris, are you able to share the DESI submittal? I have it, but it takes a while to load. Chris.
Yeah, I need to open it.
I can share it, Brian. I have it here if you need me to.
If you have it loaded, can you share? Because it wasn't
Yes.
loading in mine. So, and then if Chris, you just want to talk through it, kind of explain what we're talking about in the work you did with Bridget and Bill.
All right, so the DESE submittal, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is basically they review the project and then give sort of a letter of approval to the MSBA, which kind of helps the MSBA like feel comfortable about the design and know that it's meeting the standards. So the components of this is that there's a letter required from Compass, which you just saw, and then there's a secondary letter that kind of describes what the methodology is at the middle school. And so Bridget and Bill and their team took some time and went over this very thoroughly. And so they crafted this description of the sort of special education services. And so what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is mostly focused on is the area of special education. And so they draft this letter and include that into the submittal. And then after this letter, I don't know if you want to go forward from there. Can't read that fast on the screen, but
This is just the narrative.
yeah, it's the narrative this was in that package sent to you over the weekend. And then after that comes a space summary template. So you'd have to zoom in on this on your own screen and kind of see it in detail. But this is that template we've talked through multiple times in the process of this project, and the special education spaces are in that, but then they get broken out again as you go down even past this page into the sheets here. So these are the floor plans that are included in the submittal, and what it does is kind of highlight the special education spaces and then puts them into a chart that's easy to look at, that you can say, okay, well, the special education components of this building together all equal 10,030 net square feet inside the building, and they are located like this. And what this does for them is they want to see that SPED is distributed equally among the building and not off to one end or, separated or segregated from the general population. And so they look at these three floor plans, since you have three floors. And then there's one other sheet at the end of the floor plans that has some descriptors on how the building is sort of arranged and what the adjacencies and spatial spaces should be like. And tells you where they land on each floor. And this template is actually an MSBA template. So we update that based on what they want to see and what the DESE will get. So it's a fairly robust submittal, but this goes in, and then after this, we really strive to not change anything about the SPED program because it becomes a big process. We would have to resubmit to DESE, get their re-review on it, and I think we already have somewhat of an indicator of what the DESE thinks because one of their members was at the FAS review and had a lot of good things to say about it. So I think that summarizes that submission, Brian.
Any questions before I take it down?
All right, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so what we'd like tonight is if the committee is comfortable with that, that was in the appendix as part of the package that went out on Friday. I think Appendix A. So if the committee has any questions, let us know. If not, we'd just like to vote that to be submitted to the MSBA for the record. And that goes into them knowing that the committee was comfortable with the submission. Any questions? So Mark, we're just looking to vote to approve the submission of the DESI submission.
Very good. Could I take a motion to approve the submission of the DESI submittal?
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Gallivan. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Dr. Goff. Let me poll the committee. Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Conroy,
Yes.
Jeffrey Fisher, Jack Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Connor, Mr. Hahn,
Yes.
Mr. Senek,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor,
Yes.
and I vote yes, it is a vote. All right, Brian, if you want to continue.
All right, so if there are any questions with the early submittal package, we will get those items into the MSBA tomorrow, including the DESI submission that you just approved, and then we will reassemble that for the 7th. So update schematic design cost estimate. So this table is in your packet along with copies of both estimates. We'll give a couple highlights here. We talk through any questions you might have and then see how that plugs into the total project budget. So the grayed out columns on the left were the preferred schematic report estimate that was done in February 21. A couple months ago, total construction budget of 92.7 at that time. And the updated columns to the right are from this June, when we did the schematic design estimate. So we had 2 estimates done, one by PMNC through TAP A, one by A.M. Fogarty with Compass, both done independently. Then we brought that team together. We reconciled those to within 1%, which is a requirement of the MSBA. Went through every uniform act category division, looking at all of the different units and scope to make sure that everything lined up and was in the right buckets, aligned with each other, and reconciled all those items. So total project was within 1%. Overall, the estimate's in line with where we were with PSR, right at 92, just under 92.6. So relatively close to where we were. Couple notes, this estimate, they are trying to capture current market conditions. It is a kind of a crazy market out there construction wise, steel, concrete, windows, things of that nature. You might have heard the big talk about lumber in the last few weeks. All of those prices, labor, everything is up at this point. So to the best of their knowledge, they're trying to capture what the market conditions look like now. They also have escalation in this, pretty aggressive escalation is what industry is looking at this year, with hopefully a kind of a retraction a little bit next year. So at the bottom here, they've upped the escalation from 5% to an average of 6.8%, and that's out till bid time at the end of 2022 when we be getting trade contractor bids. So it adds another almost $3 million to the cost of the project. So within that 92, there's an additional 1.3 in market escalation for the remainder of this year and next year. Interior costs a little bit lower than PSR. A couple things at play there. A couple things move categories. Simply casework. There's a pretty big casework and millwork allowance at the PSR stage. A lot of that detail has been fleshed out in SD. Some of that, such as built-in casework, has gone into the furnishings line item. So that furnishing line item and equipment has gone up. A lot of that has come out of the interior. We've simplified some of the interior details and some of the allowances that were held at PSR. Now that we actually have quantities and narratives of what some of those products look like, be able to zoom in a little bit on that, and those prices were going down. HVAC is less than PSR. There was some assumptions on equipment at the PSR stage, and obviously the change to all electric and VRF had some cost effectiveness here at this point. But overall, mostly in the unit cost of some of the original assumptions. Now that the narratives and everything are complete, we were able to hone in a little bit better on the HVAC. Electric went up slightly. Obviously, the building's gone full electric as far as the energy efficiency design. This estimate also carries the full building generator, as we discussed. So that's included in this estimate, kind of an all-in cost. The estimators came up with a range of around $500,000 plus or minus as a deduct to go back to a partial generator, a partial building generator, estimated 500 kilowatts. So again, not just a simple emergency generator, just lights, but the actual power, keep the building heated, the IT closets, things of that nature. You could keep the building open. It just wouldn't be every outlet. But the current estimate includes a generator over a meg that would run every outlet. So that's something that we can discuss in more detail if you'd like, or something that could possibly be up for discussion as we move into design development project gets approved. The equipment costs went up due to the central kitchen. So we incorporated the central kitchen and the equipment that goes along with it. So bump in costs are related to the PSR. Also, it's including now kind of a detailed auditorium lighting and rigging for the auditorium that we have. So that equipment costs have gone up. Site drainage, also some original assumptions that we had at the PSR stage, having met in schematic design with programming, both with DPW, town engineer, as far as some of the site requirements, some of the site conditions, and obviously adding some additional parking lots and things of that nature up the site drainage in order to kind of prevent against any runoff issues or groundwater issues or things of that nature. Also, we are carrying the possibility of having to replace the site drain line that leaves the site along the southern boundary of the site, kind of behind the dugouts there out to East Street. That was investigated and possibly would need to be replaced just for its end of life and not in the best condition. So there is a cost in there. So that's gone up almost $1 million for site drainage. So that is one big difference since PSR. The markups, so kind of the markups for general conditions, general requirements went down overall, working with the estimators and looking at the MSBA history of jobs, the ones that seem at risk, brought a lot of those markups down to be more in line with what they're seeing in the industry, both from general conditions, general requirements, as well as what CMs are carrying for contingencies and fees on MSBA jobs. So that went down over $1 million. And as I mentioned, the escalation was increased to kind of brace against the current market conditions and some of the unknowns that might be out there. So at the end of the day, ups and downs, some additional scope was in there from compared to the PSR, and obviously some increased market conditions, but still came out in line with where we were at PSR at just under 92.6. Any questions on the estimate? Anyone have any questions looking through that or on this comparison? I can jump into the budget or we can take all the questions at the end.
Brian?
Yep.
I've noticed the market, we've had a couple jobs actually get canceled because of the costs. So for this to end up at about where you were back in February, I'm not confident in that. We've seen dramatic increases in a lot of stuff, especially between the steel and wood. But the fact is, it's been probably go back to 08 when I used to see the jobs get canceled, or even go back to the 1989, 90 in that era. So it's for something to stay about the same. I don't know. It's I just forewarned that this is not a very good for the next at least 6 months. The up and downs of everything.
Yeah, I mean, we would agree. I mean, this 6.8 is really, closer to 8 or 9, almost 10 for the remainder of this year to get out of this year, and then maybe a little bit less on escalation next year if it gets it to the average of the 6.8. So, kind of putting an additional 1.3 in there on that number, Jack, just for that reason. Thinking that we've captured maybe what hopefully are the heights of markets now, and some of these costs, like for instance, superstructure. So that's steel. Those are up. Between the enclosure and the superstructure, they're up almost 1.6. The shell of the building's up 1.9 from PSR. So I think that's somewhat reflective of what we're seeing out there now in the market. At least that's what the estimators were trying to capture. So I would agree that, yeah, it's a pretty volatile, high market right now. And, ideally we would see some type of retraction by the time we got the bid. I think we're in a better timeline than some projects that are getting closer to bid right around now, or obviously at the end of the year. So, no, I think you're right. And I think that's what we're trying to safeguard against here with some of this added escalation.
Okay, now I have another question. It relates to the whole project. Is typically, we've always done them, that we will go out to bid, we'll know, and you give the town meeting and the town number.
Yep.
And we can't exceed that. And if we do, which we've done in many cases, we've gone back to the drawing board and cut things out. But that's the top end that we can deal with. The construction manager, is he keeping it within, is there a guarantee to keep it within that line? Because once we hire him, things are moving forward, correct?
Well, the goal would be to have them lined up for post-town meeting. If the project is approved, then we would actually, trigger and hire the construction manager at that point. We wouldn't officially bring them on board until the project moved forward.
No, I understand that. I'm going post.
Yep. So the goal would be that we would get a guaranteed maximum price GMP with the CM working within the approved town meeting budget. So again, kind of they would work with us as part of the team as we move through design with all the submissions going in the MSBA, because they would help out with estimating as well. So that'd be part of the conversation is when we got to those updated estimate milestones, how are we doing compared to the approved project budget? Do we need to do the value engineering exercises to make budget? Or are there decisions that need to be made? But yes, they would be involved with that.
Okay, well, where I'm going with this is the fact that if the CM's allowed to release early packages without this all being captured, will it be captured before anything is released? Total cost?
I'm sorry, I don't follow what you're asking, Jack. I'm sorry. So
Okay. Typically, every CM wants to push the GMP, giving it over to the owner till the grass is growing, correct?
yeah, I mean, the goal is that you get the GMP executed. I mean, as close to, if you have an early package, obviously an early package, but it's close to start of construction of the rest of the building. I'm not sure of the MSBA's timeline on executing a GMP, but you're right. I mean, they do try to drag that out. I mean, our goal is not to have that happen and have it executed in the first, month or so, 2 months of the job.
Well, where I'm going with this is you could already be in the hole before you even get going, but you're already awarded contracts that you've already, cut the cord and you're off sailing. That's where I'm concerned about. At least with a general contractor, you have a total number before anything moves forward. And if it doesn't meet it, you go back to the drawing board. Here, you could be in a situation where you've already cut the trees, dug the hole, and we don't have enough money.
But
And that's
part
why-
of pre-construction,
Yeah,
during the pre-construction phase, the CM is gonna know what the target budget is. That's what they're gonna be working toward to get.
so as far as their buyout goes and early release packages, they'll be updating those. Early release packages will go out with, whatever they are, 60% CDs with the site, depending on the timing of it. Possibly releasing steel. There is a possibility that they'd be able to take advantage of the market and lock things in when prices, do swing for the better. But we will know their numbers. I mean, they won't be releasing anything until it's approved through the project.
Okay,
And they'll be
where
working
I'm-
to this total project budget. So
where I'm coming from is I'm involved very much so in a couple jobs in Brookline where they did the one of the elementary schools and they've done the high school, both letting as they went, and the thing shot way over budget. And Brookline on the last school that we're going to be doing pretty soon is they made the CM Gilbane bid the whole thing out so they knew what it was before they started. Because what happened to the high school especially is just escalated into the heavens. And now all of a sudden they learned their lesson is, we shouldn't be letting the concrete and the steel out when we've already let the cat out of the bag, meaning if you had to chop something off, it's too late at that point. And they learned the lesson the hard way, and that's what they've done on this school, the Driscoll School in Brookline, is they had the CM bid every package out, including filed subs, prior to releasing anything. And they had one round and they had to pare it down and then did another round. So they've been finally released. So they know what the GMP is. But all I'm getting concerned is you don't want to have something overbuilt with a bigger hole and a bigger foundation than you need. That's where I'm going with this. Because the problem you have is if you can't bring it back, now what do? It's got to go back to the voters for more money, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you got into that situation, I mean, we'd have to, I mean, I'm not sure how you'd want to handle that if you go back to the voters, because
Could I suggest, we wouldn't probably go, I think Jack is right. I mean, we generally don't go for early packages unless they're very clean cut that you could dislodge the project, you know, the CDM if it looked out of
Yeah.
whack. So for
The only-
instance, site clearing or something that's a very basic package, but they have to bid, once we get the trade packages bid, which are basically, you know, at the completion of the design set, we'd get a GMP fairly quickly because the rest of the trades can all be bid much even sooner than the trade contractors.
yeah, so what we're looking at, I mean, what we're really looking at here for early packages is really the site package in order to get the road in. Because that East Street Road is going to be, a couple things, going to be construction road during construction and access. It's also need to be temporary for circulation with the buses. So an early site package from that perspective with clearing that, getting that road done, and also taking advantage of the school schedule when school's out, and then possibly that lot up on the hill to give some laydown space and enabling work. So I think that would be the early package. And then we'd have to really look at if it made sense to do anything else early. And to your point, Jack, yeah, you do bid out the trades kind of ahead of your CD at the end of your CD budget. So similar to a design bid build, we'd be building the trade contractors, putting that GMP together fairly quickly before we got going.
I'm saying what happened in Brookline and what I did over at Elm Street School. The filed sub bids came in way over what they were supposed to. Stopped it right there, told the architect, go back and redesign, because if you don't hit that, the rest of the job's going to be over too. And what I'm concerned about is if you let stuff go early, you've already gone down the path. And if you think it's hard enough to get an override, try to get another override to pay for what you missed. That's where I'm going with this. It's much simpler. That's why I was always in favor of rip and read. There's the number, folks. There you go. But I get concerned when you start letting things out because you don't get to see it all until it's almost too late. So just forewarning.
No, understood. And I think, like I said, I think it'll be strategic in what is actually let out early. I mean, you have the opportunity to do more if you think it's an advantage, but the one would be definitely getting the site access set up, which would be a pretty limited contained scope. But yeah, it's a good point to make sure that we're staying tight to the budget and wrapping up that GMP as quickly as possible.
Well, the other thing, one last thing, Brian, is the fact that we didn't have it before is the MSBA, whatever they're called, limits you to 1%. So that's another big factor that wasn't entered in the past of 1% on change orders. So that's correct.
Yeah, for eligibility for change orders.
Yeah. And
yeah, they cap it at 1%.
So that's another issue where in the old days, we're getting 63% of pretty much everything. We didn't have this. They gave you 63% no matter what. Now, as you exceed that 1%, we pay $1 for $1. And that's another one that's we haven't faced in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's their policy on all these jobs. So it's kind of strategic for how we handle some of those change orders, but they do cap the change order eligibility at 1%.
Anybody else? Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Mark, I have one.
Okay, Mr. Fisher, go right ahead.
Okay, Brian, I'm looking at what was in the package that was uploaded. I'm looking at the one from Fogarty, And
Yep.
I'm looking at the items that are below the 68 million. And it's broken out differently. And I just want to walk through them quickly, if you don't mind.
Sure. I can pull those up. You can go ahead, Jack, and I'll pull them up.
All right. You got the total direct cost of 68,016,285. This is the Fogarty bid. And I
Yep.
assume it's equivalent to the other one. Okay. Next item below that is the construction management, the 10%. Basically we're guaranteeing to the general contractor 6.8 million in fee, in a management fee for doing the project, right?
No, so you're referring to this design contingency, Jack?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's design contingency, it's schematic design, so that's a percentage of the budget that we're putting towards the design that is yet to be completed. So at this stage, obviously, we're only 25-30% through design, and there's still 70% to go. So this represents kind of a design contingency for the owner as TAP A completes the drawings and we begin to price things out. Obviously, there's gonna be more detail, prices could end up going up. And the theory is that as the budget and as the design gets more defined, the construction costs could actually creep up a little bit, but this design contingency would be going down because in theory you're using some of that. So that's not a CM contingency line item. That's related to a contingency for just the design documents.
So as the design matures, you've got 10% in there, or $6.8 million to take care of what you would anticipate there'd at least be some growth in there as you refine
Yeah,
the design.
things that weren't fully designed out that you might have not been able to estimate, or they might have missed because it wasn't in the design yet. Things like a lot of the details around the MEP connections and wiring and things of that nature. Right now, they're kind of putting some placeholders in there. And as
Okay.
we move through the other estimates, this percentage, this 10% is going to drop, in conjunction with how complete the design documents are.
Okay, and escalation, that's just what we've been talking about for the last 10 or 15 minutes.
Yep.
Okay, and 7%, that's basically what you are about $5.25 million. That's what you put in there for escalation between now and a year from now, primarily, right?
Yep, Fogarty carried 7. I think we ended up carrying 6.8, which was what PMC had, because PMC is the estimate of record, because that's through the designer.
Okay, now what's the general conditions, general requirements? I don't understand those.
So the general conditions are the kind of the staff of the general contractor, as well as some of just the general conditions for the job of setting the job up. General requirements typically are the peripheral items on, site fencing, things of that nature. That they kind of, the little requirements of the mobilization to the site type of things, maintaining the site throughout the project, cleanup, things of that nature.
Okay, so that's basically to pay his staff and, if you will, the overhead costs of just running the site.
Yeah, you have general conditions on every project. This includes the staff. It also includes, things like, temporary facilities and dumpsters and things of that nature, all the little, any paperwork they might need to do as part of the project, that kind of stuff.
Okay, P&P bond,
Yeah, payment and performance bonds.
is that on the contractor or is that on the town?
The contractor provides those.
And so we're reimbursing him for his bond.
He's providing the bond to us.
Okay.
Yes, they have to pay for the bonds and insurance. Obviously, they have to pay for those. So he's
Okay.
buying those out.
And the 2% fee?
Yep, that's the quote unquote overhead and profit for the CM. So they spell that out. We see that.
Okay, and the CM contingency, that's their contingency. That's not the town's contingency, right?
Well, it's within the GMP for items that, they should be carrying, or they should be, in theory, they should be finding during the drawing reviews and during estimating. So basically, this is what they're carrying for anything that quote unquote they have missed, since they're part of the design team. But we still treat that we still manage that budget on CM jobs. And at the end of the day, they have the 2.25 to carry, and if they have more items, then that eats into their fee. But at the end of the day, also, we're managing the CM contingency. If they don't spend that all, if they spend $1 million, we would get $1 million turned back to the town. A lot of times that the contracts are written that balances at the CM contingency are turned back to the town. And they also have milestone markers that you can put in place during the job to say, as risks sunset on the job, you're out of the ground, steel's complete or something like that, you turn back, equivalent percentage of the contingency if the town so chooses. But yes, they carried in their GMP, but we manage that like an owner's contingency, and then they own the delta if they exceed that, because it's in theory the stuff that they should be helping us find, helping us manage.
Do change orders come out of that?
Basically what it is they would request a transfer out of GMP contingency into their base construction number. And so their so if say their GMP was $90 million and it included the 2 million for GMP contingency, the $90 million wouldn't change. It would just be, 1.5 in GMP contingencies and now 88.5 in the base construction, if that makes sense. They just transfer between the two lines within GMP.
But
If
I
it's a
think-
change in scope,
Yeah.
like we add something or unforeseen conditions or something of that nature on site, that's where they would come to the owner and say, hey, we think this is a change from the owner's contingency, and we'd handle that like a regular change order.
Where is the owner's change contingency carried?
That'll be in the total project budget. We'll see that in a minute. So in a CM job, you really have like 3 contingencies, right? You have the owner's contingency for any soft cost, architect, OPM, furniture. You have a construction contingency for any changes in scope, change order type items, where the owner asked for something different, an inspector asked for something different. Something wasn't necessarily shown in the drawings correctly or whatever. And then you have a GMP contingency for the CM to manage for things that they should have either found or helped us with during pre-construction. So we basically have 3 contingencies that we will manage.
Okay, and there's only 2 that are listed on this sheet right here. The change order contingency will be added on top of the 93 million.
The change order contingency will be part of the total project budget, correct? We'll see that in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
For you, Brian, another question before you leave, a couple. One of them is, how do you decide what the staffing is for the CM? Do you have one white hard hat in the trailer? You have 32 of them?
I mean, we typically run it by the committee and we come up with what we think the project is going to need. They can try to staff it as much as they want to staff it, but at the end of the day, they need to meet budget. So I think, we look at that, we review all that. We like to see rates, we like to see hours, we like to see who it is. So we're in control of that. And obviously we want to put the right staff on the project and make sure that they're staffing it correctly and that they're, people are rolling on and rolling off. And they're not just padding the staffing book, so to speak.
Are there guidelines for that?
I don't know if there's official guidelines, but I mean, we typically, depending on what the job is requiring, we typically see, they have a super, they could have possibly a full-time PM on this job. I don't know if they have a full-time PM. They probably have a consistent project manager. They probably have an estimating staff that'll help them during pre-construction. That'll get carried in the pre-construction fee. They might have an MEP coordinator, which is a big advantage for helping doing the coordination drawings in the BIM. They might have a safety person that comes out. They have the safety person in-house. So, I mean, I would say on a job of this size, you might see around 6 people, 8 people, depending on, and they're not going to be full-time. They're going to be bits and pieces here and there, other than the superintendent and maybe an assistant super.
Well, my experience with all these is you're gonna have a super, and then you have about 3 different supers and assistant super and a bunch of project engineers. You're gonna end up with like at least 10 white hard hats. That's where I see the drain coming, is that's one of the issues. And that's where it's how the big dig, they made their money paying for all those guys. But the other question or comment on what Jack was talking
Sorry,
about.
Jack. We'll see that in their proposal. So when they respond to our request for proposal, so when we advertise for CM for construction managers and they all send in their requirements, and then the ones that get chosen submit proposals. I mean, they're going to suggest the staff, and that's something that we will negotiate as part of picking the CM.
Okay, Brian, you went through the drill with us on the last couple, correct?
Yep.
And one of the things that I was always adamant about is we want at least a 10% owner's contingency. You still on board with that?
We're carrying 5%. You can bump it to 10. We can talk about it tonight if you'd like.
Well,
We typically carry 5, but
We've been down the road. I've been doing this a long time here. And what happens is you get close to 5, you exceed the 5. We've always carried the 10. That way you were 100%, not 100%, but pretty much assured you never have to go back to town meeting and ask for it. That's something that should be considered. Everybody loves 5% new building. I understand that, but you blow by that. That's the problem the town has to go get the additional funds. And that's an issue. I just want that.
Yep.
Being heard.
Yeah, so I'll show you what we have right now in the total project, and that's something the committee can talk through if you like.
No, it's just what we've done in the past. Now, typically that'll come, Brian, at the end, as you know. You throw the design contingency out when you get to final plans. A lot of these contingencies kind of go away, but when we're going into it, the last bit of money we have is 10%.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. If we can get to 10, we try to get to 10. A lot of times the budgets, they won't allow that, but that's something the committee can definitely talk about.
So I'm not allowing, if you get to it, you over the 5, then you got issues. That's all.
Thanks, Jack. Anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, Brian, you want to continue?
Yep, so let me open that back up.
Mark, I think Nancy had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was scanning here. Nancy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the level of specificity that we're talking about tonight. Like, I understand, that we're trying to get to the cost estimate, but I'm assuming that we're not talking about like exactly what's going to be in the furniture and equipment budget, or what temperature control kinds of systems we're going to use versus air conditioning. Like, can somebody just explain like what we're talking about and how specific we're being?
Yeah, so I'll take a shot at it, and Chris, you can chime in. So Nancy, we're at schematic design, which is 30% design. So I think from TAP A's perspective, I mean, they have a kind of like a narrative of what they're planning for the building on all the different system levels. So they're talking about, the exterior facade is a brick with metal windows in the classroom wing and some curtain wall windows in the public entrances. And they're thinking, and we've actually carried some materials, drywall in areas here, this type of flooring in the gym, this type of flooring in the hallway. They met with Donnie and specific types of tile that Donnie likes. They've also have the narrative on all the MEP systems. So we're going to do a VRF system for HVAC, which we talked about before. LED lighting. So I don't know if we're down to specific fixture types, but I think we have our actual model numbers, but we actually have types of fixtures that we want to use, and we do have an outline of specs. So yeah, it's not the very detailed design, but I think from a big picture perspective, I think we have an idea of the types of materials that we're proposing to use for the building. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add any more to that or not.
No, I think you have to get a reasonable enough specificity with the estimators so they can put budget pricing to everything, but I would kind of consider most things specific enough that we can rely on them to design to, but not, we haven't locked you into a specific color or material or anything like that just yet. So.
Right. For instance, Nancy, I mean, in the
question about budget is important that people know. I mean, the budget we're submitting is the budget for the project. And it's the budget that'll be presented to the town. It's the budget that the MSBA board will approve. So it is the budget, and what, and this is how all of these projects go. What it is that the design that we've shown these estimators who are like very experienced and know what TAPE will design, and they've carried money to accommodate that design. So while the design has further to go, the budget is something that's set, and we're not intending we won't exceed it.
So to answer your question, Nancy, they know that, hey, the staff planning room or something is going to have a refrigerator or not a refrigerator. They know that the floor is going to have this type of, just general type of tile. How many basketball hoops are in the gym, there's retractable bleachers, and they kind of price all that stuff. They know all that detail. And they kind of carry a basis of design when they estimate those things, and they're seeing, what the market is telling them, what they're seeing in the market prices for these types of materials. So yeah, I think we're going to have more, as you would move through design, we'll have more detailed design about the interior palettes of things, and what the finishes actually look like, and colors, and how they go together. And you can move them up and move them down, but you're still going to be kind of working to this budget. And we think that, I think Chris will say that this budget is kind of driving toward the most cost-effective, solution that we can come up with. That's, at the end of the day, it's not bare bones, but it's not over the top. So it's kind of a cost-effective, durable, sustainable design.
Okay, so let me just ask a couple of questions then. I'm glad to hear that Donnie Anderson was involved in, giving input.
Yep.
In the walls, in the hallways, how high up will the tile go versus just like the walls that might get scuffed or get dirty looking quickly, I guess is what I'm wondering.
We have the tile currently shown in the hallways up to about 5 feet.
About 5 feet. Okay, that's all right. We're not air conditioning the building, but we are temperature controlling it. Would that be the way to describe it?
You can refer that to Wayne as on the call. I think Wayne, can you describe that?
Yeah, so while we are air conditioning the building, we're air conditioning to a degree that that is cost effective. So what that means is we're not air conditioning the building so that it's fully occupied at the end of July when it's 89, 90 degrees out there. We're fully air conditioning for the building so that it'll be comfortable into the early July. It'll be comfortable at the beginning of September through into the following year.
Wayne, we're not air conditioning the gym?
We are not air conditioning the gym.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's by design. That gyms are a huge energy hog to air condition, but that's typically why we don't do it. But to answer your question a little bit more specifically, what we show already in the schematic design is areas such as the administration area, student dining, the media center. Those areas are fully air conditioned and designed to be fully air conditioned even when you're in July or August in that school.
Okay, thank you. How about cameras? What are we putting in as far as about how many cameras are we talking about?
It's over 100.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact number, but it's in that estimate. I think it was 100 something.
And none in classrooms, correct?
No security cameras in classrooms.
Okay. And technology has, obviously, that's an important piece of the budget. Are we assuming that we're going with Chromebooks going forward? And that's the way we did the estimating?
Yeah, but so just to clarify, that's a different part of the budget. Actually, truth be told, the Chromebooks are not in the budget. Buying the one-to-one devices are not part of any budget of this project. That was, we talked to Mike Frisch about that. This budget carries all of the infrastructure for technology like wireless access points, the wiring, any computers that are in the building, like hardwired,
any classroom technology. Yeah, so there's a technology narrative included with all the other narratives, Nancy. So the technology in the classrooms, media center, those type of things, conference rooms will be included in the budget. The security will be included right now it's included in the construction budget. And then the peripheral, kind of the loose technology, if you will, and then some of the infrastructure technology will be through the owner's technology budget. We'll see that in a minute. And that's something you can control, how much we carry for that.
Okay, the reason I'm asking about that one is because I think that if you know that we're going to be using Chromebooks, we potentially are going to want to be able to charge the Chromebooks in the classrooms. And that's
Yep.
part of the infrastructure that should be there. And it should be like simple and easy to use. From,
Yeah, so as we get more detailed, we can talk about if you want to put those chargers in the back of the classroom. For instance, they did that in Natick, where they had the electrical and the data jacks in the wall as part of construction, and then the technology department actually bought the charging racks as part of the technology budget, and they installed them in the back of the classroom. So yeah, that'll get more detailed as we move through design.
yeah, that's why I brought it up. It doesn't seem to be working too smoothly right at the moment. So, but so long as we can still like address that from a detail level, that would be helpful.
Yep.
Okay, and my last one is, do we build in, I know I asked this once before, but do we build in a number of water bottle refill stations rather than water bubbler? I saw water bubblers somewhere, but a lot of kids are bringing water bottles, and we should have a bunch of water bottle refill stations.
They're like an all-in-one unit, Nancy. It's like they have the option for a typical fountain, but then they also have the bottle filler on it as well.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
So when you see that, it's kind of all the same.
Okay, thanks. That's
All right,
all I
anything
got.
else related to the estimate?
No.
So overall, I mean, given a lot of the different variables, and we're in line with where we were at PSR. So moving forward with that. From a square foot perspective, the square foot has gone up slightly. Square foot cost simply because the building got a little bit smaller from PSR. As you remember, we were able to kind of consolidate some spaces, some programming, and take out about 10,000 square feet, which is huge from a cost perspective. Obviously the cost stayed the same because we had some escalating prices, we had some additional scope, and we're adding some additional escalation. But from a building size perspective, it is more efficient than it was. And this is actually on the MSBA's website. So this was updated at the end of April. I think we've shown this once before. The red arrow is actually pointing to that fourth plus sign. That was actually Walpole's PSR submission at 543 a square foot, as compared to other schools that are in the same, or other projects in the MSBA that are in the same time frame as us. So all the plus signs are their PSR estimates. The three other pluses around Walpole are actually elementary schools. So I think that's a good sign that this is a fairly cost-effective design, that you're in a very similar square foot cost going up against a lot smaller schools. And then the updated SD at 571 is still below that $600 a square foot. A lot of the schools out there today are up in the higher numbers, even as high as 800. Some of the ones that are closer to Boston. So I think overall we're trending to be a very cost-effective building. A lot of details still to be worked out, but I think in general it's on the right track, and there's still some opportunities, I think, down the road to tighten up a few areas. I'll go through this. I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. It's a lot of information, and try to get you guys answer some questions. You got the whole worksheet for the total project budget. This is updated today. A couple things have changed. And this is the form that goes into the MSBA with schematic design that they will then review, and we will start the negotiation process, getting to a scope and budget agreement, like we talked about at the last meeting, by this August, and we'll get that, and that's what gets approved at the board meeting in August. So we'll send this into the MSBA. They'll actually comb through everything. They'll deem things, to be ineligible or eligible, and we'll discuss that and get to a final agreement on where things fall. So what I did was I broke this into a couple slides just so it's easier to see, to kind of walk you through how things kind of shake out of this. So admin, OPM costs, we're updating our fee for the whole project. We'll put this in here, but right now this is fairly close. This is the feasibility budget. So this is the 1.5 million that we're currently working off of. And then the only thing that was deemed ineligible is they deemed some of the work by David Stevens to be ineligible because it was done before TAPA came on board. So that gets bumped out in ineligibility. Things like legal fees are categorically ineligible. We talked about that. So that gets bumped out. From an OPM perspective, what they look at is any costs for excluded scope. So like the auditorium, they'll take the cost of the auditorium square footage, and they'll do a proportional kind of ineligibility deduct from the OPM and the designer. So some of that fee gets bumped out. any costs that go over the MSBA's cap. So we're working on our fee to get this down below the cap, but this gets based on when they recalculate eligible construction costs, they compare the fee against it and come up with an eligible cap. So we're working on that. We'll get that down. So that's admin costs. Same thing for designers. You kind of take the designer's fee. They bump out any excluded scope like the auditorium, a proportional ineligibility deduct. Same thing for anything that might go over the cap. So we got an updated fee from TAPAID today, and this is basically it, but they're trending into a good spot as far as a good percentage for the project. But just wanted to kind of capture a worst case scenario with this. We'll work with them to get that done before final submission. Total project for construction. So this is the estimate, starting with the estimate that we just went through. So we basically took that estimate, you fill in all the different categories that were on that comparison form into the template. You add in like demo and hazmat. There are some things that are category ineligible, asbestos containing floor material get kicked out of that. So they put that in the ineligible bucket. Building site works. This is a big one. So
Ryan,
site
can you go
talk-
back to that? Can you touch back on the ineligible on the?
Yep.
You're just going fast. I'm trying to keep up.
All right. Yep. This is the budget, and obviously they'll comb through this, and they might pick out something in the construction budget and possibly deem it ineligible. But right now, we're moving forward that it's all eligible. The one thing that is already clearly stated is the asbestos containing floor tile. Building site works. This is the remainder of the construction budget. So it's site and then all the markups that we talked about. So what they do is they take the site, you have 8% of your direct building costs. So the direct building cost is roughly 68 million in our opinion, but then they take out all the ineligible and they come up with a direct building cost of 56. They take the 8% of that and they say that's how much site work that we'll deem to be eligible, and anything over that cap is going to be deemed ineligible. So they take our site costs, compare it to that, and they bump it out. That's common on most new projects like this where you have some site work, and that's a way that they balance it out between projects. Again, they're looking at ineligible excluded scope like the auditorium, and they're backing out some of those markup costs, et cetera. And then they pull it all together and basically say the total construction cost of the building, and they look at it a square foot cost versus their 333 a square foot cap, which we showed on that chart and we've talked about in the past. And they look at any excluded scope like the auditorium, and they basically come up with a total deduct of construction costs of roughly 33 million. So we're carrying an estimate of 92. They take out 33 and change. They add in the site cost overage to this cap and the excluded scope, and they come up with 39 million excluded. And they give you basically an estimated construction cost of 52.7, and that's what they end up basing their reimbursement against. So like we've talked about, they don't end up basing it on the full number of construction, the full total project budget. They're basing it on what they deem to be eligible. So this is kind of our first pass at what we think is going to be ineligible. And then they look at other things like the remainder of the spreadsheets, the miscellaneous costs. So utility company fees, moving is ineligible. So we're assuming all that line item would be ineligible. And then Nancy, this is where the furniture and technology is. So they give you a cap of $1,200 per student. Right now we're carrying $1,800 for furniture, $1,800 per student, and we're carrying $1,500 for technology. And $1,500 was where Natick came out in actual costs. So basically anything over that $1,200 per student cap, they deem that to be ineligible. And you really can't do a new building for the $1,200 per square foot from a furniture perspective. So it's not uncommon for schools to be going over that. Natick, for instance, doubled both of those. They did $2,400 per student. They'll let you do that, but obviously $1,200 of that is ineligible. So right now we're carrying 18 and 15, which gives you a total project cost before contingencies of 109. The MSBA tallies up all their ineligibilities, and they're basing their numbers on 66.9. One good thing is our soft costs right now aren't exceeding 20% of construction, so we're not over that cap. But overall, we're kind of tracking right to where we thought we were going to be when we first did this a couple months ago. And then at the bottom of the spreadsheet, they kind of pull it all together. So the size of the building, your reimbursement rate. So we're actually going to get, right now we're projecting 3.5 additional incentive points. That's 2 for the energy efficiency and 1.54 for the capital maintenance plan that the district has. So projecting a final reimbursement percentage of base percentage of 52. But when you apply that against that lowered estimated maximum facility grant of 66, not the 109, that 52% comes possible reimbursement of 34.9 million, which at the end of the day kind of spits out, 116 total project cost. The MSBA maximum grant would be around $36 million. And the town share would be just under 80, which is what we've been talking about for the last few weeks. A couple of things of note here: we are carrying construction contingency, so this is where we add that in. Jack Fisher, we're putting in 5% of construction, so 5% of the 92 million is a $4.6 million construction contingency, and 2% for the owner, so we have 7% in contingency. So we actually have just over $6.4 million in owners total contingency for the project. Another thing to point out is that the MSB actually looks at their past projects with your town. So in this case, they're going back to the Bird Roof project in 2010, and they kind of do like, what's the usable life left on that project, and they actually come back to recover a part of that cost. They're going to pull out $57,000. But at the end of the day, I think right now with the SD estimate, we're still tracking right where we thought we were going to be. Total project cost 116, 92 of that's construction, 52% base incentive with incentives from the MSBA, but we think we're going to pick up around 30 to 33% in actual effective reimbursement. This also is presuming the third gym space, the extra classrooms for the teaming setup, the central kitchen are all eligible. They indicated that on the PSR comments, that they did not have any issues with that, but we'll see where that is when we actually negotiate that with them. Project town share, about $80 million. And we had talked through the tax impact before. Obviously that's to be decided, but average assessed value at $450 a year, just again, assuming a 30-year level debt at 3.5%. And it also that also assumes that obviously the full share would ultimately be bonded, and there aren't any factors right now, including that like expiring debt. So that's something that the town will decide as we move forward. Any questions on the estimate and how that fits into the budget? So the next steps, as we talked about at the last meeting, we would look for approval of this information, submit this into the MSBA, and then begin the process of working with them to come up with a scope and budget agreement. And again, this would be the basis of kind of setting the budget for the project. Obviously, we can work and potentially go lower than that, but this would be the max budget that the MSBA would support, and the owner would be on the hook for any overages to that.
Do we have any questions or comments?
Mark, I have one.
I do too.
Yeah, Mr. Fisher.
Brian, as part of the package, do you submit the estimate on the funding on the financing piece of it?
All we did with the PSR state, you mean related to tax impact, Jack?
Yes.
So all that we did at the PSR stage is we submitted the range of potential tax impact, and basically just so the MSBA understands that the town is thinking that through, and that you are aware of the potential tax impacts of the project. So yeah, but this last bullet point, we're not submitting anything related to that with SD.
So you're not making any submission as to a 30 versus 25 versus 20-year time frame, or what the potential finance rate would be.
No, they really don't care about that. They put the burden on the town to then go secure the financing after the scope and budget agreement at town meeting and the town ballot.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gallivan?
It was me.
Nancy? Yep. I'm sorry. Who was that?
Katya. Katya.
I'm sorry, Katya. Go right ahead, Katya.
I just want to note, like, it's year 2021. This building is going to be around for many years. Many of you might not understand that climate change is a real thing, but I find it really problematic that we're not doing central air. As it is, there were some schools that were already canceled this year because of the heat. This is a brand new school. I get the temperature control, but low 80s.
Chris or Wayne, I don't know if you can address that. I mean, I think that it will be temperature controlled. Yep.
Yeah, low 80s.
No, let me address that. the design of the school, it is air conditioned, but it's a VRF system, so everything's modular in concept. So if you were going to use one of the neighborhoods in the school and fully occupy that with students in July and August, it would be air conditioned. The school's designed so you don't have to have a big central air conditioning plant running all year long when the school is only partially occupied. So through controls, you can decide where you want to occupy the school and have it air conditioned. It's air conditioned actually to meet the ASHRAE weather standard. So right now it's a 2%. So Boston is designed to meet, it's designed to be air conditioned for 91 degrees dry bulb, 73 degrees wet bulb, which is Boston weather data. And that's a 1% instance. That happens 1% of all the hours over the year. And the system that we're proposing, this VRS system, this is the same system that's being applied in all the net zero schools that are being built throughout New England, in addition to the United States. So it is air conditioned. Everything is air conditioned. We're designing it so you don't have to run one giant or two giant chillers to take care of smaller areas of the school. So it adds flexibility to the use of the school.
So Wayne, what is a set point temperature, say for a classroom that you could put it to?
So because we're going to be a lead school and we want to meet the ASHRAE 55, which is the thermal comfort standard, which LEED dictates. If it's 91 degrees outside, it'll be 75 degrees in a classroom. And that's the guideline. When it's 91 and 75, that's pretty comfortable. And it's 50% relative humidity. So it's not 75 and 75% relative humidity, it's 75 degrees with 50% relative humidity. So it's comfortable. It's what the guidelines stipulate.
So Wayne, would be comparable to, people might be familiar with like the Mitsubishi mini splits they have in their, room where they're able to cool a couple locations with just that unit versus running a whole central air conditioned system to cool that room?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Brian. So it's basically, it's a commercial institutional grade version of that. It's designed for institutional commercial applications. We use it in not just public schools, we also use it in colleges and universities as well as office buildings. It is one of the systems that is also eligible for the incentives that Eversource and NGrid are now offering for this technology, which is pretty substantial incentives. But again, it's kind of like I said, a simple way to explain it, it's a commercial institutional grade version of a Mitsubishi mini split.
Will they do heat as well? Is it like a heat pump type of
Yeah,
thing?
exactly. It's exactly right. It's an air source heat pump, and the compressors are driven by variable frequency
I have
drives.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. They speed up and slow down to meet the load. Yep.
Okay.
I hope that helps makes people feel a little bit more comfortable.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Mr. Sanik, you had a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. I heard there was a mention about the gym not having any air conditioning. Is that normal for most buildings from a gym standpoint? I feel like gyms would be used actually in the summer mostly for recreational activities as well. So obviously, if based on the initial designs that we've seen, there's a lot of windows that we're putting into these into the gym area, especially from a lighting standpoint. So I feel like that creates a greenhouse effect.
Chris, you want me to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, you can talk about the gym approach, but on the windows, I'll tell you, they're not like clear vision windows. It's a like translucent material, so that blocks the UV and much of the solar heat gain. So it's a part of the strategy there, is you get the daylight without some of the effects of the solar heat gain. But Wayne can talk about the typicalness of gyms.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I would say probably 90% of the schools that we design, we don't air condition the gym just by virtue of the fact that it's a huge air conditioning load that can drive energy costs up. That is not to say we have an air conditioned gym. Some schools where the gymnasium is used also as the assembly space, we would provide air conditioning or some type of tempering. Some communities where they voted to air condition the gym is because they use the gym as a revenue stream, a source to rent out to gymnastics camp, indoor track and field events, dance groups, performing arts. So, but generally, if we're not directed to air condition the gym, we generally try to steer away from fully air conditioned, just from the kind of reduce the energy cost and the energy impact on the project.
Anything else, Mr. Sack?
No, thank you.
Very good. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question, Mark.
All right, Brian, go ahead. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Jeff.
Brian, can you go back to the scatter plot that you had with the comparisons, please? Yeah. The square foot. There you go. Can you talk a little bit more about that? You said something about the 3 plus signs that were near us. They were reasonable approximations for what we're doing for a certain reason. If you could just go back over that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so just for comparison's sake, so if you go to the MSBA's website, I thought I had the link at the top of this, but if you go to the Building With Us link, and then you click on that, they actually have a whole bunch of different links that you can click on related to construction data. And one of them is this construction cost chart. And this basically tracks with the little key up here. You can kind of see the projects that have moved through their system in the last, 10, 11 years. The orange squares are projects that have been completed. The orange squares without fill are ones that currently receive bids. Blue squares are schematic design estimates, and the pluses are preferred schematics, are really the first estimate that they see. And they keep tracking this data of how their projects are going for any particular time. So they keep updating. They keep updating the project as it moves through its iteration of cost data. So we'll start with a plus, then the next time they do this will be a square, and the next time we'll do that will be an orange square type of thing. So as you can see, like the trend of projects over the last several years, I mean, if you just kind of pick a average point in all this data, kind of see where projects are falling and the sharp spike you've seen in the increase in construction costs, not only across the board, but specifically in schools. And then I'm not sure if you saw the graphic before, but this green line down here that's kind of stepped, that's actually the MSBA's reimbursement. So that $333 per square foot is what they kind of cap their construction costs at. So they're not saying that you could build a school at $333. They're just going to say they're going to participate up to $333 out of whatever square foot cost you have for your project, and they'll reimburse $333 at that eligible square footage. So there's a huge gap. You can see automatically that they, like right out of the gate, regardless of who you are, that delta is going to be ineligible. And what you track here is you're looking for schools that are comparable in size or comparable communities to see how you're doing. And Walpole, when you put your cursor over this on the website, it actually pops up what community, what school it is. Walpole is the 4th plus from the bottom right here at this arrow. And these other 3 schools are elementary schools. And obviously we're building a much bigger middle school. So we have much more amenities type, in a middle school than you typically would have in an elementary school. So a lot of times you can see that, it's a more expensive project. You get the benefit of some added square footage to that, but I think the fact that we're kind of in a similar ballpark as cost per square foot for elementary school that doesn't have the same programming as the middle school, I think, I read that as a positive, that we're building a pretty cost-effective school. A lot of the projects up here are middle schools and or high schools. Maybe more leaning more towards the net zero type of design. Maybe they have a lot of different variables. Could be site costs, could be this one's in the city, so to speak. It could be a much bigger building. But I think in general that the goal for us from day one and the directive to TAP A is that we need to be as cost effective as possible. We want to be kind of middle of the pack, saying that we're getting the best bang for the buck, so to speak. We're not the lead price up here. We're not at the bottom, but we're where we should be. So I think overall this is a good sign at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? I don't see anything next, Mr. Jarvis.
All right, so one of the questions we have is, if there's no other major questions or concerns, Is there anything that anyone else needs to see or questions answered that would, kind of preclude us from voting this package to move forward to the SD submission at this point? I mean, we were teeing it up to come back on the 1st to formally vote that, thinking that we might not be ready at this meeting to have all this information together. Obviously, we're going in front of the committee and the board this week and early next week to seek endorsements from both school committee and the select board. They're going to get presented with the same numbers. We wanted to have this committee see all that information first. But just thinking out loud, if there's no other major issues or concerns or need for additional information, is this package, in addition to all the other stuff that's being submitted early, is this ready to go into the schematic design submission? We have a few loose ends to tie up, but nothing, materially is going to change from what you were presented with tonight.
So does anybody have any objections or questions about our voting on this tonight?
I had one question, if you don't mind, Mark.
Yeah.
Brian, going
Mr.
way
Conroy?
back to the,
All right, Mr. Fisher.
Sorry.
All right, Mr. Fisher.
okay, Brian, going way back to the beginning where you had the highlighted areas that were ready for early submission.
Yep.
What are the ones that are not ready for early submission that you're asking us to basically vote on?
So the only ones that will not be ready for early submission are, there's actually a 1-page form, Jack, for the district anticipated reimbursement rate. That's actually ready. We went through that tonight. Basically, it just lists the chart of here's your base rate, here's the incentives that you're eligible for, and it spits out that 52.22 number. So we actually have that drafted. The total project budget spreadsheet is what we just went through.
Okay.
We told the MSBA that, it might not be ready, don't expect it, but we'll try our best. The project work plan, and these are actually administrative items, kind of a project work plan for design phase, the directory, the communication document control procedures. We have all that stuff drafted. And the project schedule has actually been updated. So that's updated, ready to go. So everything is actually ready. We just weren't sure, if we'd be at this point tonight. So we didn't commit to that with the MSBA. And then the local actions and approvals is once this is approved, then this is the form basically saying that, we had this many meetings, this is what we talked about, these are the votes that were taken, and it gets signed by Superintendent Jim and Nancy, and that gets submitted into the MSBA.
On the project schedule, is that a total project schedule through to completion or just through approval by the MSBA?
Yeah, total project schedule, it hasn't really changed much. We've updated with some of the details related to the CM at risk procurement, but as far as start date, end date with construction, it's kind of a couple big lines on the bar chart. So yeah, nothing substantially has changed from the last updated PSR.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments?
And Mark, Jeff.
All right. Yeah, right ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, we got the information Friday night. Appreciate that we had the time over the weekend, but obviously I didn't get a chance to look at this until Sunday night for a little bit and, some time before this meeting. So I'd just personally like some more time it was a lot of information to consume in a short period. So I'm not ready to vote tonight.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? So I'm not quite sure what we do here. Do we vote on whether to take a vote? I'm not sure. Do we have anybody that wants to be our parliamentarian?
Well, the way the schedule's set up is we have a meeting scheduled for the 1st. We just put it on the agenda tonight. If the committee felt ready, then obviously you could make a motion to do that if you wanted to.
Well, I'll agree with Jeff that I think that this was a very complete package. There's a lot of information in here. And honestly, I think waiting a week and a half to the 1st, which are basically 9 days, to give us additional time to look at that, I think it would be well worth it to ask the committee to go back and take the 9 days to look at it and vote on the 1st. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Brian,
So
when
we don't have to make that as a
done?
motion necessarily.
Make a motion to approve this on the 1st, the package.
All right, very good. So we have a motion to consider to vote on the package on the 1st. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a
Well,
second.
just to be clear that the yellow stuff is going in tomorrow though.
Yep.
And then we resubmit it on the
that's-
1st.
Yep.
Yep, okay.
Very good. So we have a motion to consider and vote on the package on the first. And we have a second. Let me poll the committee. Ms. Fisher, pardon?
Yes.
Not there. Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yeah.
Mr. Conroy,
This is for next week?
the July 1st.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Jeffrey Fisher,
Yes.
Jack Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Hahn,
Yes.
Mr. Stenick,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. It is a vote. So,
Okay.
Mr. Jarvis, over to you again, I guess.
Yeah, so that's all we had for estimate and the budget update and sustainability update. Chris from TAP A will be giving the updated information, kind of follow up to a couple meetings ago. So this is what we saw last meeting. The energy modeling in conjunction with Eversource has been ongoing and complete. We have some consultants here to talk about that tonight. They did get the projected hours of operation for the new building, which was a key piece, especially if you're talking about energy efficiency and getting towards net zero. How you use the building and how long and when you use the building is a major factor in that. As Wayne already mentioned, we talked about a VRF system previously and again tonight, looking at some of those costs and projected costs, and then some additional strategies of how to maybe target a lower EUI, the energy usage intensity, that we talked about as one of the thresholds for some of the incentives that are out there. So with that, I'll turn that over to TAP A and his team, to Chris and his consultants.
Thanks, Brian. Share my screen. Okay. Assuming we can all see this.
It's loading. There you go.
Okay.
You have your square in the corner though, Chris.
Hate that. I can't see you guys whenever it's okay. So just wanted to say thanks to Wayne from Griffith and Berry and Rosie from Andelman Lalick and Magda. I think Magda might be on tonight as well. They're going to be listening in, and hopefully I don't mess anything up. And if I do, they'll correct me or answer your questions as they come up. So where we left off, Brian kind of had that slide just a second ago. This was my version of it. What we really want to kind of dig into today is really the bottom half of this and show you what we've come up with. So the LEED scorecard, this was in that package of things that you received over the weekend, and we're targeting 52 points. That gives you a LEED silver designation should we be able to hit those, and then there's a bunch of other maybes that we may be able to get along the way, but it's not designed enough to really sort of put those in the attempted category. So just wanted you to see that the LEED process is moving forward and we're targeting those 52 points. And then the big thing here is that qualifies you for the 2 additional points that Brian spoke about earlier for reimbursement from the MSBA. So this was just a screenshot of the early results and assumptions model that we did in collaboration with Eversource, and kind of looking at the current model. And I like this image because it gives you the 3D view of it, but also kind of shows you how the building is oriented with north off to the north of the page there. And so this is just the introduction to that. Andelman Lalick, who Rosie is with, and Magda did this energy model, and then Wayne helped back in some of that information there. But the basic process is they go through and they ask some questions about schedules of use. So the energy use intensity of the building is highly affected, as you might assume, by the use of the building. That's what the capital U is for. So we went through a process of asking questions to the district and sort of making assumptions and qualifications, and then also confirmations of that use. And so this is sort of the table that forms that basis of of use. And it could vary from this a little bit, but for now, we think we've kind of honed in on a pretty good program for the building that will be used and how the energy model is based. So the real bit of information that I wanted you to see here is that that 92 million construction cost that was just talked about in the budget gets you that 2% MSBA, does meet the stretch code, and the current design for the EUI is hitting about a 26.3. That takes into consideration the full kitchen load, which is a much larger kitchen load than is typically brought into these schools because it's producing meals for the entire district. And so, so that 26.3 is where we sit today with that estimated $92.6 million. And so that's a pretty respectable EUI. It's a good, really good building for 2021 and the climate change and all of the sort of things we have to think about and the stretch code. But the Eversource incentive target that we started out this whole conversation talking about is off to the right there, which is a 25. So you can see we're kind of hovering around that. And so the question is, how do we get there? The pink number, or the sort of second from the left, is what Rosie and Edelman Latham did was they kind of sub-metered the kitchen so they can see what the effect is that the central kitchen has on the total building as a whole, or in terms of EUI. And so you can see when that larger kitchen load is sort of subtracted out or decreased, you get down to that 25. And then the green number is the green line is the one that we're going to talk about next. So within that current, the current $92 million is the VRF system. And this was done by Wayne. So if there's any questions, or Wayne, if I mess this up, you can definitely chime in. But this life cycle cost analysis was also in the narratives that were sent over to you all as part of that package. The key thing to focus on here is that the projection is that the first cost for VRF are slightly more expensive, to the tune of about $170,000 to install. But then you see down at the bottom here that the operational cost over time is much better, over just over $300,000 over time. And so when you take the first costs out of that savings, you get to a total differential savings of about $141,000 for that system. So I think the question was asked before, what is the cost benefit of doing the VRF versus something like a VAV? That's what this is compared to. The differential cost, or the savings the town would see over time, is somewhere in the range of $141,000 for the life cycle of those systems. And that's through the 25-year study period. So if we look at it again from another direction, so that's in the base 92 million. The current data that we used for the energy model, if you break out the energy model into a pie chart, it might look something a little bit like what's on the left. And so you can kind of see where the energy in the building is going to. I find this kind of graph really helpful because it can help you really identify, well, what are the spots that we might achieve better results than others when we talk about trying to get to that Eversource incentive. So that energy model that we talked about before, these are some of the things that we analyzed as potentials for getting the building back down to the 25 or lower EUI, which gets you qualified for those Eversource incentives. And so I'll just run through these pretty quickly here. The top one, which is ECM number 1, ECM stands for Energy Conservation Measures. And so the number 1 is a lighting power density. That's what the LPD means. Right now, the model assumes a 0.5 watts per square foot, but we think that We could possibly design that a little bit better and get to a 0.4 if we really sharpen the pencil. And so you might say, well, why don't we do that anyway? Chances are we probably will do that during the more detailed design, but right now we haven't done that yet. So this is something that would be factored into that savings in the DD. So it's really kind of a no-brainer to take that as one of the strategies that we would use to get the model to be a little bit more efficient. The next one is heat pump water heaters. So the DHW is domestic hot water. Stuff you use on your hands or whatever. So using heat pump technology instead of electric resistance technology has a big savings. And that was one of the things that we found by running this model, is that both the lighting power density and the heat pump for domestic hot water really had a big effect on the building. The downside to that is that the heat pump water heaters have a big cost. So about 3 times the cost, 3 to 4 times the cost of the electric resistance water heaters. So that was a big cost increase of $425,000. And you can see over here in the right-hand column that that by itself represents something like a 68-year payback. In and of itself, you might not choose to do that. And then the next one was reduce some glazing at the, so that middle piece between the classroom wings and the auditoriums or public zone of the building. There's a link there that's 3 stories high, and it's really just a passageway from one part of the building to the next. The team said, well, what if we reduced that just by a little bit and just taking the square footage cost of curtain wall and striking that down a little bit? We came up with a potential savings of $143,000, which we may choose to do that anyway during schematic or during design development, to just sort of value engineer and design the building a little more. And so that one seems like, well, we should really probably add that into the mix. And then the number 5 here was a glazing. So we asked what the difference in value for double glazing to triple glazing would be. And so this 0.28 U value represents a triple glazed unit, and the additional estimated cost would be about $788,000. And the savings is not that great, or in terms of payback, 422 years. So that doesn't really seem like you're getting a lot of bang for your buck on that. So we don't really recommend looking at that any further. And then the wall value. So currently in the design, we have a wall section that looks somewhat like what you see on the bottom left there, which is a rigid insulation on the outside, and then some batt insulation on the inside of the wall that isn't the full depth of the wall. This is a good wall design. It meets the stretch code, and it's also a cost-effective wall design. But to change that to something that is a little bit more energy efficient by making the batt, look at the inside of the wall here, the batt insulation thicker, with also providing the foam, the spray foam on the outside edge of the wall. It's on the inside face of the sheathing, but on the outside edge of the studs. Doing that assembly represents about a $400,000 add once you run it through all of the markups and everything. But it has a pretty decent effect on the building in terms of EUI. And so again, on the right here, that in and of itself represents about a 104-year payback. So when we ran options 2, 3, you can see here 2, 3, 4, and 6, which is the lighting power density, the heat pump, the reduced connector glazing, and the insulation in the walls. When we ran all of those together, they represented a basic total added first costs of $581,000, or a 34-year payback. And those items all together would get you down to that 24.7 EUI, which makes you eligible for the Eversource incentives, which during design, initially, that would be a guaranteed $1.25 per square foot. which brings that initial investment down to 378,000 or a payback of 22 years. And then after construction, when they do the post-occupancy survey and verify that the building actually hits what we designed, what we modeled it at, you get an extra $1 per square foot, which could go to pay for some of these offsets as well, which lowered that value even more to about $216,000 premium that you've invested in the building, or a 13-year payback to get the building below 25 and net zero ready, or which sets it up for any potential solar or other strategies to make the building actually net zero. So that was a lot of information, and I hope that it helps paint the picture on some of these strategies. And what we're basically saying with this is that the design team recommends that we go with these strategies of 2, 3, 4, and 6 to make the building a little bit more tuned to get down below that 25, make yourself eligible for that money from Eversource. And we just sort of bake that into the next round of design and design development. And these additional costs would come out of that design and pricing contingency that we just talked about earlier. And so I think I'll stop there and take some questions if you have them for the engineers. We can definitely entertain that. So.
Do you have any questions or comments? I don't see anybody. If I don't see you, just interrupt me. Okay, hearing none. All right, Mr. Jarvis, anything else?
So I just want to confirm, I guess there's no questions or concerns, and is that just consent by silence, I guess, that we're going to continue going forward with these strategies of the lighting, power density, heat pump, glazing, and wall section modifications during DD, so that we can tell. I mean, we're going to update the model and model it that way for Eversource, so that we can start to get the incentives and work on that for this design phase. And so that's the desire of this committee based on this presentation. Are we able to walk away from this with that?
Chris, Nancy has a question. Nancy, you have a question?
Yeah, let me just try to put this into a question. Can you give us sort of the bottom line again, Chris? How much more money do we have to add to the total project cost? How much does it eat into the contingency that we have? I guess those are my two questions.
Okay. Right. So what we're saying by our suggestion here is that we're saying that we add the $581,000, which is a sum total of, just try to use this, of the 100,000, the 425, the 143, and then this 400 number. So that 581 is the sum total of those 4 yellow circles. And we're saying that likely if you approve us to go this route so that we can model it this way and show that to Eversource for the design, the construction incentive, we're projecting that that's going to show up in the next estimate as a potential $581,000 hit to the project budget, but that would be covered through that 10% design and pricing contingency that we just talked about. But then once Eversource pays you your incentive money for the design phase, you would then be down to a total of $378,000 spent. And then at the end of the project, you would get that second payment, and it would be a total total investment to get to a net zero ready or below 25 EUI of about $200,000. That's your bottom line. Is early on, you're going to see it maybe show up into the tune of like 500 or maybe just around $600,000. And then as the project progresses and you factor in the incentives that the Eversource pays, you'll see that budget, you'll see it come down effectively to that around $200,000.
So Nancy, I'll add to that, that it's not a,
Any other
it's
questions or
not a
comments?
current. Oh, And yeah, Nancy, I'll add that it's not a current contingency in the project budget that we have right now, like the 1.5 million. It's the pricing contingency of where we were talking about, whereas the project becomes more detailed, the construction costs might go up a little bit, but that construction contingency then goes down because in theory you have more of the details figured out. So Chris is saying adding these details to the next estimate would be offset by that design contingency. You know, it could work out that way. It could also be when they price it, it might not end up being that expensive either, but
Okay, so it's gonna look like an extra 581 at first. We're going to bring it down because of the Eversource incentive. And we will receive that during construction, or like, I guess I want to know when the money is freed up in case we need it for something else.
Rosie, do you happen to know when they pay that out? I know that the construction one is paid early and then the last one is paid after they do a post-doc, but do you know relatively when that is?
Let's see, the post occupancy incentive, I assume would need to be after the building's been occupied for a long enough period of time for the team to ensure that the energy conservation measures have been implemented and are working correctly. So I'm not sure exactly when that payout usually occurs, though. Maybe Magda knows.
I can chime in also. This is Magda Lelek. So the first piece, the construction incentive of $25 per square foot, occurs after the building is constructed. And Eversource typically conducts an inspection to check that things that were supposed to be included in the building are included, but before the actual occupancy can even start. The second piece of the incentive, $1 per square foot additional incentive, typically would be paid out in cases like this approximately 1 year after occupancy, because Eversource will want to see a 1 year worth of energy use data, so they can actually check that the building operates as it was estimated to operate under that EUI of 25. So first payment at the end of construction, the second maybe a year after construction, after occupancy.
I'll add to that because part of the data that goes into Eversource as part of this program is that use and occupancy table, and basically a commitment of the district that they're using the building a certain amount of time so it can actually qualify for these incentives.
And the bottom line here is that we'd still be borrowing 581 over 20, 25, or 30 years, but then getting a lump sum from Eversource in a couple of installments. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the potential paybacks, Mark. And then the other piece to the net zero is when the town determines or the district determines if and when they want to go down the net zero path. And obviously there's mandates of when those need to be in place. And you start introducing renewable energy. That's when you start getting into like the yearly cash flow of, is the building and or the site, given its low energy use rate, producing more than it actually uses over the course of the year, and kind of lowering those energy bills or possibly eliminating some energy bills. And then you have that kind of like yearly cash flow, net cash flow happening, for the life of the building, so to speak. So there's a couple different avenues of how, this payback occurs, but the missing piece that we're not recommending at this time, because I don't think the town kind of understands how they want to move forward with this, is that renewable piece where you really start to see some of those cost savings and locking in energy rates at certain rates for the remainder of the building's life, that type of stuff. So to answer your question, yes, you would get a lump sum, you would possibly borrow that money would go into the project cost, but then you have the ability, the building would be set up to do some type of renewable that would, give you those energy savings over the life of the building that would, far exceed what you might be paying in debt service. That's what some towns are realizing.
Great.
I have a question.
Yep, Mr. Conroy.
581, what's the MSBA's cut of that?
They would deem to be ineligible?
These are ineligible costs.
No,
These
I
are-
mean, what-
These are eligible.
these are
all
eligible.
So
So
we
the-
don't get the 581, they take their kick out of it.
No, the 581 is what you're paying, Zach. This is the cost, the first cost to install these items. The incentives that you're getting from the incentives that you're getting from Eversource are going to be a total, potentially a total of $225 per square foot, which is
So none of this reimbursable goes back to the MSBA.
I mean, it could, but it's gonna still get capped at that 333. So you're improving the building, you're making it a better building, but the MSBA, like Brian talked about, is gonna cap at $333 no matter what our cost per square foot is. That's probably where this would play in.
Okay. I have another issue, the fact that that money's just gonna go into the general fund and be gone. I went through it in the library, had $1.5 million turned back, and it never got turned back to the taxpayers because they just said we can't do it. Mr. Boynton said he didn't know how to return it. He knew how to take it, but he didn't know how to return it. And that's what I have an issue with, is this will just get absorbed somewhere and never be taken off the top of the override.
Good point, Mr. Conroy. Does anybody else have a question or comment?
I do, Mark.
Yep. I didn't see who that was.
Ben Barrett.
All right, Mr. Barrett.
Thanks, Mark. First, I wanted to say thanks, Chris. I think that's one of the most coherent and lucid explanations of UI that I've heard. That was really good. I appreciate that. It's really clear how all that comes together, and you can see the differences. I appreciate the pictures there. I think the idea, at least for me, comes back to exactly what Brian was saying, is that the town is operating under a state mandate at this point for environmental regulations. And it's something that I know that we've talked about a lot lately, in joining green communities and all those sorts of efforts. And that's one of the reasons for it. I know people talk about, well, we need to be more environmentally conscious. I personally agree with that. But there's a financial aspect and a risk aspect to the town under these state mandates, where I simply don't think we can afford to do the bare minimum. And when we look at the exterior detail that Chris showed us there on the left, which does meet the stretch code, but doesn't put us up for any of these other efficiency opportunities, I really think that's going to come back to bite us at the end of the day when we come up against these mandates. And we've seen it with the police station and the fire station, that we didn't take these opportunities when we could. And so it's a break even, right? So it's a risk analysis where we say, well, we want to spend a little bit of money. We're going to get some money back from Eversource, but we know it's going to put the town in a better position, a less risky position over the next 30 years when it comes to these environmental mandates. So I think it's a real clear explanation here. And I appreciate that. And I think it's a no-brainer that this is something that we need to take the opportunity to do now at this point to set ourselves up appropriately for the future.
Any other questions or comments?
I have just a quick one, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
The Eversource reimbursement, what is that? Is that a guarantee? I mean, is that reimbursement program, is that based upon some federal grant, some federal program that is part of the $6 trillion bailout or whatever you call it? Or is it a handshake? Do we have some sort of a contractual agreement between Eversource and us that if we do this, they're going to reimburse us this? Or is it just kind of, well, this is the program today, but it may go away tomorrow?
No, you've signed a memorandum of understanding the district has. And so you're basically signing on to get into the program. And then once you get into it or you demonstrate, my understanding is that it is a guarantee, because if you look at your energy bill, you can look at anybody's energy bill, you're already paying into the fund that funds this kind of stuff, for like all of us. The town, like everybody's paying for some of this. So you're basically kind of like getting your money back in some ways. I don't know if that oversimplifies it or if I've overstated it, but.
Well, no, you answered the question, Chris. Basically, there's a signed MOU between the town and Eversource that if we do this, they will pay us.
Yes.
Okay.
You're in, yeah.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Blesson? I don't see any hands. All right, Mr. Blesson or Mr. Jarvis? What next?
So yeah, I just, not to be dense about it, but I'm taking this as our directive to move forward this way, right? And this is how we're gonna sort of finish the modeling phase and this design phase. This is how we're gonna report back to the Eversource. This is how we're gonna update the documents. And then when we get into DD, assuming that the project passes and everything in November, you'll start to see this stuff show up in the estimate and things like that. So I'm just like triple confirming that that's what we're doing. And if that's not what we're doing, we need someone to tell us that now.
Mark, should we take a vote to just confirm that understanding?
I would think, it
Yeah, I
seems to
think
me that that's what he's asking for. Yeah, and since it's a big chunk of change, that we should be holding a vote. Would anybody like to make a motion to, not sure how we'd phrase it, to
You can say, make a motion to capture the energy conservation measures as shown here, item 7, which is combined 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, 4, and 6, as strategies to get to the Eversource EUI of 25 or less. I think that would be a.
So moved.
all right, we have a motion from Ms. Lawson. Do we have a second? All right, we have a second from Mr. Fisher. All right, let's pull the committee. Mr. Frisha,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yeah.
Mr. Conroy,
Yeah.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Jack Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Hahn,
Yes.
Mr. Senek,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor,
Yes.
and I vote yes. It is a vote. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jarvis, anything else?
I think the only thing we had left was just update on the next meeting. So we've already talked through that. So we are going to school committee Thursday evening to give them a brief update, kind of the high level numbers that you folks saw tonight and next steps, and seek endorsement of the project from them, and also give an update to the select board, I believe next Tuesday, the 29th, to seek their endorsement as well. And then we will be back to this committee on the 1st to final vote on the package.
Very good.
We do need to get, sorry, Mark. I just wanted to say we do need to get one more meeting date on the schedule, because they're gonna come back on the 1st and vote. And then we need another meeting to vote on the minutes in order to complete the submission 100%. So I was either gonna suggest the 13th or the 20th of July. It would be a very quick meeting to, the only admin item we would need to do is vote on the minutes of the July 1st meeting with the vote language.
Yeah, probably be invoices and that, approve those minutes, and that's it.
Any objection?
Any preference?
Any preference, 13th or 20th?
It has to happen before their August meeting, correct?
It has to happen. It's better that it happens quicker, because they actually don't consider the application 100% complete until you check every box. They'll accept the draft, but the certified minutes can only be produced once you all vote on the minutes.
Well, let's do the 13th.
Okay, I'm cool with it.
Yeah, Tony, I might not be here on the 13th, so like if so, I can just give you power to, run the meeting for the link and then
Okay.
maybe I can join by phone.
Yeah, it'd be a very quick meeting and we just need a majority vote on the minutes. So I don't think you wouldn't be needed, but
Okay.
The objections to the 13th? So we really just need a quorum,
Right.
a few of us. All right, so the 13th it is.
okay, I'll send out an invite. Thank you all.
Brian, I think that's it.
Mark, I have one question.
All right, Mr. Fisher.
Mark, I guess something too.
Were you meeting with the school committee and the select board? Will their endorsement become part of the package?
No,
Sorry?
we can make record of it. I mean, it's really a courtesy as they have representatives signing the package. You guys, the representatives that are signing it are already on this committee. But typically we like to get the information in front of those committees and boards, and then that way teed up for actually your final vote that you'd actually have those endorsements in hand. Sometimes that's a good thing to have before the committee votes. But yeah, they're not required for the MSBA submission if that's what you want to do.
So I guess I didn't quite understand the answer, Brian. Are you saying that the fact that the representatives from the school committee and the select board are part of this committee and they are part of the vote, that means that there does not have to be a formal vote by the school committee and the board of selectmen endorsing this as part of the package?
Correct. So the school building committee is the formal body that approves this to go into the MSBA, and the signatures on those forms are representative of the select board, chair of the school committee, and the superintendent. So we typically just go to the committee and the board as a courtesy, and a lot of times towns will actually vote to be on the record that those committees and or boards endorse the project and we're aware of the project. But it's not officially required to submit this to the MSBA.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Jeff?
Yeah, so actually, as part of the meeting minutes that we voted on earlier tonight, I actually wanted to have some discussion around them. There were some open-ended items around community outreach, and I just wanted to make sure that they're being addressed, most specifically regarding an in-person meeting with senior citizens.
Yeah, I think you're kind of going in and out a little bit. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
Senior citizens, Walpole, meeting minutes that we approved tonight. Sum it up. It's not me going in and out.
It's completely broken up. Will you start over?
Let me stop my video. All right. Tonight we approved meeting minutes and there was some open items around community outreach. The big one for me was senior citizens and in-person meeting that we were going to look to have. Who's trying to close the loop on that one?
Yes, we talked through that on Thursday with the working group, and we're trying to coordinate that through Jim and Patrick's office with potentially doing something at the COA or another venue. So yeah, we're ready to go. We could do it. We can do an update whenever. I think we were targeting middle of July to kind of get through this submission with the updated numbers. So it was coming. It was coming soon.
Okay, I guess my point is I think the concern the senior citizens group had was the numbers themselves. So I mean, is there a way we can have that forum or address those concerns ahead of that?
Yeah, we'll do whatever. I mean, we'll however folks want us to get out in front of them, we'd be willing to do that.
So should the July 1st meeting be an in-person at the COA to allow them the ability to comment? Participate? Go on record? Am I the only one concerned on this?
Jeff, there's
Why
talk
would the
about,
COA be involved in our meeting on July 1st?
I'm not saying the COA, but that could be a venue.
think, Jeff, there's been talk about not a building committee meeting, but an update for the seniors, and they're trying to
Okay.
coordinate. I think that's what Brian just said.
Right, but that's separate and apart from our meeting on July 1, right? I mean, that would be a briefing for seniors held at some point, but that, I don't understand how that ties into our July 1
Let it
meeting.
being, Mr. Jarvis also discussed other community outreach items, including the need to schedule an in-person meeting with senior citizens of Walpole. Is that as part of a open public meeting with the school building committee? If it's not, then it's a non-issue. Don't worry about it.
I don't think it is, Jeff. I just think it's something that's been requested that, as Brian said, maybe Pat or Jim are going to try to arrange with people at the senior center, but it hasn't come to fruition yet. No.
I have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Conroy.
When we going back to live?
That's a good question too.
Hey, I'm sorry, before we move on to the next question, just can we finish that first question? Maybe since we're meeting next Thursday anyways, maybe by then Patrick and Jim and Brian could have a date that they're gonna go to the senior center and give a little presentation. Does that seem like a reasonable way to?
I just want to clarify, we'll coordinate on our end. It's not going to be my presentation or Patrick's presentation. And I don't want to cut anyone off. We're going to have, just like we have in the past, school department, superintendent, Brian, project team will all be there and to explain it. And we have been working with Kerry to have some outreach for the seniors, but we haven't picked a date yet. My concern is if we pick something in July, some people are going to be away and it won't be as well attended. So we are coordinating that. And of course, you guys will all be invited. We'll post a meeting for you just so we can cover any open meeting law issues. So just be mindful that we're definitely not going to skip over that, having some public outreach meetings at the COA.
Yeah, I think we had targeted because of some vacation schedules on the project team, like the July 19th might be the first week that might work out. So yeah, we can coordinate that with.
Yeah, Brian, I think we talked about that. We talked somewhere around the week of the 19th.
Yeah, we can work with Mark and Bridget and Nancy and whomever to kind of coordinate a presentation.
Great. Jack, I think maybe, Mr. Conroy, your question about when we're going to meet in person, maybe we could flesh that out on the quickly in the July 1st meeting as well, because I don't think anybody has a firm answer on that.
Well, okay, I have a firm answer. This 29th of May, it was everything's well open. Selectmen have met, my planning board's met. Why aren't we meeting? There's no excuse.
I have a firm answer. Can we do hybrid? There's plenty of, like, we can do this meeting virtually. So can we do a hybrid? So half of us are in person, half of us are virtual.
Once again, everything's off. We're back to where we were as of May 29th. Selectmen have met, planning boards met, the other boards are meeting. Why aren't we meeting in person?
Point well taken, Mr. Conroy. Again, we'll have to flesh that out by July 1st.
Why won't we flush it out tonight? Why don't we take a vote right now, Mark, to see who wants to meet in person, who wants to do it this virtual crap?
Well, I don't know, Mr. Conroy, that phrasing it that way is really going to get the committee very motivated to discuss it.
Okay, whether they're motivated or not, I put it out there. You're stalling me, Mark. You want to push it to July 1st, to another date of doing this Zoom. You as a chairman, I'm asking you to I'm going to make a motion that our next meeting is live. Could I get a second?
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Conroy. Do we have a second? I don't hear a second, Mr. Conroy.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Then go down this road. Good luck getting to school. Thank you.
Mr. Conroy, I can't hear the
My point. Okay, we are a public entity. We should be performing as a public entity, but if no one wants to second it, then fine. I'm signing off for tonight. And
Mark, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can we look
All right,
at,
Dr. Goff.
thanks, can we look at, you know, I don't know what, do we have a list of future dates after the July 1st? I know July 1st is tough because people are probably zooming in remotely, they're on vacation. And that's why the July 1st, because we're only a week away. But looking at, you know, in through the summer, I don't know what the meeting dates are, so maybe that's more for Brian. You know, at any of the rest of the project meetings on what our futures school building committee meeting dates are. And then being able to look at those to see when we could start, or if or when we can start having those in person.
I like that idea.
Very good. Any other final questions or comments for the evening?
No, I mean, I wasn't willing to second because, you know, July 1st, it's obviously more accommodating for me to join remotely, but, you know, I do agree with Jack that we should have a public forum available, even if that means that, you know, participants are joining hybridly, you know, some joining remotely. But I like the idea that, you know, we've got a venue to hold the meeting. We've got a venue for the public to attend the meeting, to, you know, go on public record, voice concerns, have input. I think it's important that we get there.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else, questions or comments? So I think with that, then.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Very good. We have a motion to adjourn for Mr.
Second.
Fisher, and we have a second. Who is the second from? Mr. Barrett, we poll the committee. Mr. Frishaw,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, Mr. Conroy, Mr. Jeffrey Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Jack Fisher.
Sorry, yes.
All right, Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Hahn,
Yes.
Mr. Sinek,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor, Ms. Santiago Taylor. She votes yes.
Yes.
Very good. The meeting is adjourned, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks.